So for those who don't know, over the past 2 months, I've been looking at the videos on my channel, and overall, it seems like my videos discussing the actual show have been kinda rough on views, as they still seem to be received well, but for some reason, people just aren't as interested in hearing about Bluey itself. Or at least from my channel. Personally, I feel like it has to do with the fact that there's now a gazillion mindless, low-effort channels that have now talked to death about the show, to the point that even I have to admit I'm starting to get tired of people talking about it to no end, so I guess I don't blame y'all for that. However, with all that said, outside of just the actual show, there aren't too many videos about the fandom, including one specific topic that hasn't been talked about as much. And well, if you read the title, you already know what's coming. It's Bluey shipping. Because just like with every other fandom, Bluey surprisingly has more than a few fans who are passionate about shipping, as in imagining what characters might date or just be with each other, creating things such as fan art or original stories to boot. And while some of these are usually tame and seemingly pretty normal, there are a few ships or choices of characters that can definitely be a bit surprising, with some featuring characters that seem completely random, haven't even met, or just characters from completely different shows altogether. And that's what I want to discuss today, beginning with those that some might consider unusual, but I think could maybe work under the right context, and then to the just absolutely insane. However, before we begin, I should of course clarify that before people grab their pitchforks, I don't have a huge problem with all shipping in itself, as I know it's a somewhat controversial practice within the fandom, and it's not really something I have much interest in, but I personally can see how it's a fun, creative outlet for fans of the show, and that, while I might make some jokes about these unusual ships, this is not meant to make fun of or personally insult the people involved, or different types of relationships. I personally believe that people can be in whatever relationship they want, as long as it's consensual, unless you're like, you know, shipping siblings or creating inappropriate stuff with the kid characters. In that case, you need to seek help. But with all that said, this is all in just good fun, so let's begin. So to start, we have the iconic duo Bandit and Chilli. Oh, Hideaki, you silly dog. That's not a ship, that's a canon merit. And Pat. Okay. Wait, what? And Wendy. Huh? Okay, so yeah, from face value, that seems like a pretty odd ship. And personally, I don't know if there's that many people who actually ship these 4 all together at the exact same time. Lord knows I'm not going on Google to see pictures of that. But for those who don't constantly scroll TikTok or Reddit, good for you, there's actually a, I guess, somewhat famous fan theory, which states that Bluey's parents, Bandit and Chilli, as well as I guess all the other adults in the neighborhood, basically hook up with each other's wives and husbands, and that they're all in on this exchange of sorts. Or something along those lines anyways. And from the little I've seen about it, some depict this as everyone knowing about it, while others believe that the characters are actually cheating on each other. No joke, such as Chilli being with Pat, or Bandit being with Wendy. And regarding Pat, I honestly have no idea why people think Chilli is falling for him, apart from the fact that he's attractive, I guess? I mean, even I would fall for him if I was her, not gonna lie. But regarding Bandit and Wendy, this one to me seems a little more believable, because that dude has done some interesting stuff in her presence. But overall, even with that, I always thought this one was a little bit out there, even by Bluey theory standards, because it's pretty clear that Bandit and Chilli are a loving couple, so I wouldn't imagine them cheating on each other. And of course, yes, they do have disagreements, but that's just like, I don't know, pretty much every other couple ever? And to say that they're hooking up with other couples just because they know each other or had a few silly moments seems like kind of a stretch in my personal opinion. But with that said, there is one picture in the Bluey Hammerbarn book where Bandit and Pat are giving each other a very interesting look. And listen, I'm not a CIA agent or anything like that, but to me, those aren't yay we did it or yay the family is happy type of faces. What those two are telling each other is something a whole lot different, and it doesn't seem to be about the products of a hardware store. And on top of that, it's even funnier when you consider the fact that pretty much all of the pictures from these books use frames from the actual show, except for this one picture. So yeah, this was a very interesting creative liberty if I must say so myself. And with that in mind, maybe we should worry less about Chilli and Wendy and focus on these two blokes right here, because this blue rectangle and corn kernel might be up to something. And speaking of Bandit, his name is actually quite fitting, because if internet ships are to be believed, this guy is out here stealing everyone's guy and girl. Whether it be Wendy, Pat, the other Pat, Brandy. Basically, if there's an adult character in the show, someone out there probably drew Bandit hooking up with them. And I mean, to give you an idea of how chaotic some of this gets, there was even a ship of Bandit with Bandit! As in like the early versions of him from the pilot and such. Which is honestly so absurd that it's actually one of my favorites. But moving on from Bandit, for now, we have a few other characters that have also been shipped. And these ones are particularly interesting because I have two pairs that both have something in common, which is the ship between Bluey's teacher Calypso and Chilli's sister Brandy, as well as Bandit's brother Uncle Stripe and Jack's dad, who I've been told is, in fact, the father of the character Jack. And personally, even though these were somewhat popular, I never understood these ships. Because with the other ones like Bandit and Wendy or even with Pat, you could at least argue that they knew each other, and that could, I guess, theoretically branch into some kind of romance. But these characters right here don't even know each other. Like, there's never an episode where Calypso and Brandy meet, and I don't even think Uncle Stripe has probably heard of Jack's dad. So when I heard about these, and realized that there were actually more than a few people who made fan art for it, I was honestly really confused, because the selection for these seemed incredibly random. Like, are people so creatively bankrupt with shipping that we've now resorted to just pairing up whatever fan favorite comes into mind first? And this is what I originally assumed, but I thought for sure there had to be some kind of connection. So I ended up asking my followers online about it, and got a couple interesting answers. Starting with Calypso and Brandy, some mentioned that they had a headcanon of Calypso being infertile, in a similar fashion to Brandy, and that if the two were to meet up, they would likely bond over this connection, or just the fact that neither of them have kids themselves, but love taking care of them. Now of course, with the sign we now know that Brandy is actually having a baby, and we don't fully know if Calypso actually does have a child or not, but I do find this idea interesting and I can kinda see it a little bit more now. But on the other hand, regarding Jack's dad and Stripe, I honestly didn't get too many solid answers for this one. But if I had to guess, I'd assume that it's mainly just because they're both kinda awkward, and as horrible as it sounds, neither of them are really known for being the absolute best parents in the show.
What day is it, bruh?
And while on the topic of shipping characters with little to no relation, we have Mackenzie and John Luke.
Wait, what?
Suggested by user OceanDefense24. Now, I won't talk too much about shipping around the kid characters, because I feel like that practice in itself is a completely separate can of worms. But one I just had to discuss was between Bluey's friend Mackenzie and Bluey's other friend John Luke, because this is another one that also involves two characters that basically don't know each other. And in my opinion, this one is even stranger because, unlike the previous ones, I don't really think these two have anything in common, outside of, I guess, being the same age and just happening to be friends with Bluey. And in fact, I think that's literally why people ship them. them. But overall, I don't have much else to say about this one, and it's not a very common ship at all. But on the other hand, when you look at it, you can easily see why, because it's honestly super random. However, if that wasn't surprising enough, there was actually another ship that I thought was quite strange, but actually pretty interesting. And this one involves two things? I don't even know if they're considered characters because they're not even sentient. They're more like toys or objects actually. And it's a ship between Bob Bilby and Unicorse, as suggested by user Casual Butters. As in, yes, the hand puppets from the episodes called, well, Bob Bilby and Unicorse. They both had their own episodes. And with this, you might be thinking, okay, how does this one even remotely work? Like, did Bandit drink too much or something, and just made a puppet show of the two hooking up in some sort of weird scene deleted by Disney? And well, no. That scene unfortunately doesn't exist. But perhaps even stranger is that there was basically this small trend online where people basically challenged themselves to redesign the two and actually make them anthropomorphic, giving them full bodies and even new designs, some of which are admittedly pretty well done. And with this in mind, this of course also opened up the floodgates for people to naturally ship the two, as with their new bodies and personalities, it gave people a chance to make them a couple, with unsurprisingly, Unicorse being portrayed as the loud, chaotic rock star of the two, and Bob Bilby being the more calm one, a reflection of their personalities in the show, or rather the ones given to them anyways. And overall, just the idea of shipping two non-sentient toy puppets in a cartoon show is such an incredibly random decision, but in the spirit of the internet, the fandom actually made it work in a way that is actually kinda cool, which is much more than I can say about some of the less savory ships I've seen in the past. However, before we discuss those types of ships, I wanted to bring up the topic of crossover ships, because if you thought some of these ships we talked about were random, you've yet to see the craziness of Bandit hooking up with Chum Chum, who, if you don't know, is the dad from this show called Chilli, which many saw was a copycat of Bluey. I've talked about it before on my channel, and about how it's basically Bluey without all the things that, you know, actually made Bluey good. But outside of the negative reception, after the show released, and knowing the background of it being from a politically conservative group, many online decided to troll the creators in a very interesting way, which was accomplished by shipping the dads from both shows, showing them hooking up and, well, even doing other stuff you'd expect to see in a relationship. And outside of that, this isn't even the only ship involving characters from other shows, because user Contour Elm reminded me that shipping Bandit and Brian Griffin, yes, the dog from Family Guy, is apparently a thing.
What?
And as a person who had to look that up to see if it was actually real, and not some weird fever dream, I won't spoil the results, but yeah, y'all probably shouldn't copy me. But perhaps even weirder than that, and possibly the most nonsensical ship of all of these, shockingly doesn't involve Bandit, but instead Chilli, who in this case has been shipped with, okay, y'all are gonna want to sit down for this one, SpongeBob SquarePants? This one got recommended a lot, and I mean, I guess both of them have something related to pineapples in their house, and both of them are kinda colorful, kinda square-shaped creatures? Oh, who am I kidding? I got nothing. Meme or not, this is just hilariously bizarre. Like, how would this even work? How would they meet? What would cause them to be so attracted to each other in the first place? And frankly, I don't think we'll see an answer to any of those questions, and honestly, I think it's actually funnier that way. However, with all that said, on a way more serious and less funny note, I have to address the elephant, or in this case, dog in the room, as there's a set of ships that maybe aren't as random, but far more unethical, if that's the right word. And it's of course, well, how do I say this without getting demonetized? Ships between siblings and parents with their kids. Because I hate to be the bearer of bad news and all, but in some of the deep, darker corners of the fandom, these are concerningly popular. Whether it be Bandit being shipped with his brothers, or even worse, being shipped with his own kids? And you're probably thinking, okay Hideaki, sure these ships are really messed up, but it's not like they're popular or getting stuff like fan art or fanfiction. I'm sure some edgy person probably just made these as a bad joke and that's it, right? Well, frankly, that's what I thought too, but regrettably, I then learned that, in fact, there was actually numerous fan art and chapters of long fanfiction depicting these quote-unquote relationships. But frankly, both for your sanity and mine, I think it's best if we just leave it at that. Overall, I don't want to go too much into detail with these ones, because they are definitely some of the more messed up ones. And the fact that it seems like more than a few people support these ships, including some that are relatively active within the fandom, is honestly pretty concerning if you ask me. But thankfully, if there's one good thing to mention about this, is that while these ships are far from unknown, it's not like the majority of the fandom is okay with it, as these types of ships are, once again, usually only popular in very select corners or niches of the fandom. And unlike some of the other ships, these only got recommended for this video solely under the context of them being really weird and even disturbing. So it's not like a majority of people here, shipping or not, actually support this kind of behavior. However, with all that said, that is pretty much the extent of unusual Bluey ships. I'm sure there's plenty more I probably left out, and I couldn't even include all of the suggestions I got. But my point is that Bluey shipping is actually pretty huge in the fandom, and with the few I've highlighted here, is only a scratch of the surface in every pair that's been created.
Bluey's gonna marry Kenzie.
No, I'm not.
So if there's any unusual ships I missed, or you just wanted to give your opinions about the ones I covered, I look forward to hearing your picks below, as well as your opinions of the ones I discussed. Such as how I'm completely wrong about these ships, because they're definitely, totally canon, and that you're sending missiles to my house for being a non-believer. But of course, with all that, we've reached the end of the video. My name's Hideaki, and until next time, I'll be seeing you all soon. Goodbye, everyone. Wait, what's that sound? So, for today's art of the day, we have this great piece by artist Danny Boy Stover from Twitter, or X, featuring a fun drawing of Hideaki being a little bit cheeky and tagging up a wall. I thought this piece was really nice, and super funny with his smug face and all, so thank you.